Okay, this is going to be a tough one. Hey, and welcome to the Neurodivergent Musician podcast, where I explore the world of neurodiversity and musicianship. I'm your host, John Hart, along with Luna, my guitar, and today I'll be talking about going through a mental health crisis. Each episode is broken up into a traffic light format, where I'll share insights in the red section, improvised babble in the amber, and recommendations you might find handy in the green. Now, before I proceed, I would like to provide a trigger warning. In today's discussion, I will be addressing sensitive topics such as suicidal thoughts and plans. If this topic is distressing for you, please prioritize your well-being and consider skipping this part. Remember that reaching out to a mental health professional or a trusted person in your life for support can be incredibly helpful. I'm now going to head on over to the red section for some insights. Okay, now let's dive into why it's crucial to discuss mental health crises within the context of the neurodivergent community. Neurodivergent individuals often navigate a world that may not fully understand or accommodate their unique perspectives and needs. This lack of understanding can contribute to heightened levels of stress, anxiety, and feelings of isolation. By shedding light on mental health crises, we can raise awareness about the challenges faced by neurodivergent individuals and work towards creating a more compassionate and inclusive society. So how do mental health crises manifest in the lives of neurodivergent musicians? As artists, we are familiar with the intensity of emotions and the roller coaster of thoughts that often accompany the creative process. For some neurodivergent musicians, these experiences can be overwhelming, leading to a sense of hopelessness and despair. By sharing stories and experiences, our aim is to break down stigma, raise awareness, and provide support for those who may be struggling. But where can neurodivergent musicians turn to for help when they find themselves in crisis? It is crucial to establish a safe and nurturing environment within our artistic communities, where individuals feel comfortable reaching out and seeking assistance. I'll be going into a few recommendations at the end, such as helplines and maybe some support groups and mental health professionals who specialize in working with neurodivergent individuals. By engaging in open and honest conversations, we hope to encourage early intervention and foster a proactive approach to mental well-being within this community. And lastly, we must discuss the steps we can take as individuals and as a community to support neurodivergent musicians during mental health crises. Educating ourselves about mental health, practicing active listening, and offering empathy are just a few ways we can make a positive impact. Together, we can create a network of support, understanding, and resilience that promotes mental well-being within the neurodivergent music community. So that is it for the insights. I'm now going to go into the amber section where I'm going to go into my improvised babble. See you then. Okay, so we're now into the amber section. And I think with every single episode I've done so far, I feel already there is a tangle, there's a twisting inside of me. And, you know, I might get really upset. I'm already starting to get upset. And I think this is probably going to be the most vulnerable I've ever been in an episode like this, or a track. And some people don't like to hear people cry. Some people don't like to hear people sort of express this, because it's not something you can fix. And, you know, I know for a lot of people, I developed a track with lyrics in my head that I never actually released, called The Response. And I'll go into the crises because I need to. This is kind of the episode I've been building up towards. But the response was from people around me, and how, you know, they either listened, or they tried to fix, or they just tried to suppress it. So plug a hole in it, and or be at service, or be something like that. And everyone deals with it in a different way. And it was really fascinating. I didn't mean to analyze everybody around me, but you quickly know. And anyway, so, right. Going into the crises. So I was talking before in the previous episodes that I had a panic attack, and then that sort of bled into, you know, severe anxiety around that panic attack in August 2021. Again, this has been a recurring theme. And then had SSRIs, and with sertraline, you know, I was supposed to have it for a few weeks and then see how it goes. And it got left. It was like, okay, see how it goes. And I was getting worse. It was getting worse. And I went on sertraline for probably 8 to 10 weeks by the end, and had lots of compounding effects. You know, had a bill come through from HMRC telling me I had to pay back like £15,000 or whatever it was within a month. And this was in November. So I had the panic attack in around August. I had SSRIs straight from the doctor. I had other letters coming through the door. I was really not in a good way. And then obviously the compounding effects of all these letters coming through the door from HMRC, from different sorts of things. Business was crashing. This was post-COVID as well. I was completely and utterly a mess. The Ferrari or the express train was going so fast, and I couldn't put the brakes on. I tried everything. And then I had one bill, you know, for a few thousand, and I had another bill, and then I had this other bill, and it was, you know, it was so much money that on top of the SSRIs, on top of the panic attack, on top of the depression, on top of all these things, this came through in November, and it was like pouring fuel on the fire. And this kind of spiral been happening. I had a business crash in 2017, and I was trying to plug my business since then, and then we had COVID. So this spiral been happening for a long, long time. And even though, you know, loved ones and everyone as well can be cautious, they can try and say, don't do this and don't do that. You know, sometimes when something is happening and it is going to crash, it's inevitable. It is what it is. And everyone can look back on it and kind of go, oh, I wish it did this, and hindsight, and should we have done this? But actually it was meant to happen. But in November, when I received that big letter and I said I had to pay back this amount by my birthday, which was 15th December, I kind of knew it would crash the business, it would ruin Christmas, and it would have a devastating effect. And I was not rational, and I wasn't logistical. And then I tried to phone my accountants a number of times, and then it got left a week. Then it got left another week. Then it got left another week. And you can probably tell it was just, you know, anybody having that letter come through, it will be incredible stress. But to have all those things and then unaware that I've got a neurodivergent brain, I know I was dyslexia, but I didn't know I've got these other things, and having mental health issues and having other problems, business problems, all sorts of stuff. I've been resilient my whole life, but this really did, stack on top of me. And you imagine it was all the rocks that came. And I finally had a meeting with my accountants set up for the 6th of, I can't remember what it was. It was early December. And I kind of put my life on the line for this meeting. And I remember I was dropping the kids off. It was a Monday morning. And I dropped them off, and then I went to the accountants for the meeting. I was so nervous. I was so worried because I literally had 2 weeks to go until this thing had to be paid or sorted or wherever it was. And I felt like I wasn't being listened to or acknowledged. And it was something out of my control. And then I turned up and I was kind of told, oh, did you not get the phone call or the answer message to tell, this morning, which was when I was doing school routine, to say that it had been cancelled. And that was the flick of the switch. And it was really hard. It flicked a switch in my head, and then it was there and then that all that resilience had gone, I felt, and something popped in my head. And the only way I could explain it was like a tunnel vision hunter feel. Because so many people go, but you've got loved ones, you've got all this and stuff as well. And it's just like, it's not like that. You don't choose to have this. Your brain goes into complete survival mode. And the weirdest, ironic thing, the survival mode was to, well, let's just end this. Because you feel like you've got nowhere else to go and you feel like you're completely trapped. And shame and guilt and everything from contacting other people to be able to help you just goes out the window. And it's almost like your brain then just goes to one direction. And I took myself to a local lake and I had a little walk around. But then my brain, and this is the problem with having a very creative brain, it came up with lots of ideas to take my life. And it started making plans. And now I'm someone who can come up with an idea, and within an hour, I can have a website, I can have a domain, I can have business cards, I can have all these sorts of stuff. So you can imagine if you then apply it to something really deadly, it can really, really accelerate very quickly. And I walked around the lake, and then I decided to get in the car and drive across the country, because I thought, right, I'll go to the sea, because I grew up on an island with, surrounded by the sea. And I thought that would be a nice way to go. It's so weird talking about this. Like, it feels like this is like a year and a half ago. This is going to come up to 2 years this December, but it's so crystal clear, and it's going to be crystal clear for a long time. But I remember getting in the car and just driving. It was about an hour and a half down to sort of South England. And all the things going through my head. And I had, I had my wife and children in my head. And the other analogy of that tunnel vision hunter vision is I stepped over this invisible force field in my head. It's almost like a sci-fi film. And as I went over, I looked down and there was just this pit. There's just a drop. But then on the left, I saw my wife and my children kind of on the other side, but they were flickering. So it's almost like they were faint. They were there, but nothing else was there. Not even my guitar, not even my music, not even other loved ones. And as I was driving, it was just kind of thinking about the sea. And I was thinking about how that's always given me comfort. And that would be the way to sort of go with it. But then a logistical brain kicked in. And it was just like, I need petrol. And I was like, okay, I'll pull into a petrol station. And it was almost like there was an interrupt to my brain. And so I went in, got to the petrol station, filled up, bought myself a double-decker, because that's my favourite chocolate bar. And it's just ridiculous. I just remember it crystal clear. And then I drove down. I can't remember exactly where it was, but it was the south of England. But as you drive along the seafront, there was barriers, and there was, and then as soon as I saw the sea, it was kind of like, oh, no, I don't want to do this. This is too calming. This is too, I call it her, the sea, and it's just, I feel so connected to it. And then I started driving home, and I got a phone call from the doctors and things as well, and checking in how I was doing, and it was just like, oh my goodness. And then my wife also phoned, just like, where are you? And I said, oh, I just went for a drive. And I wasn't really being honest because I didn't really know what was going on. But I got home, and that evening I decided to go and purchase the extended edition of the Lord of the Rings, the first film, Fellowship. And I was like a kid at Christmas. So I went from like devastation in the morning to elation in the evening. Just swing of the pendulum. And I thought, oh, that's it. That's done. I've got over this crisis. So I went to bed, and then I got up the next morning, and I was in hell again. I was like, oh shit. I am even worse than what I was yesterday. Because all the things about the finances, everything was still swirling around. And my brain had almost like 8 hours of charge. I was so exhausted by the day that when I went to bed, I did sleep, but it was almost like my brain, my creative side of it wasn't, and it was creatively coming up with really dark stuff. So I woke up, and it was just like, today's the day you're going to end your life. And then I got out and I put my feet on the floor, and it's like, today's the day is going to end your life. And then you walk, and then you've got these thoughts completely crushing you over and over, obsessiveness over and over and over and over and over. I got in the shower, and it was like still there. And then I got out of the shower, dry myself, and it was still there. And then getting dressed, and it was still there. It was almost like this shadow or this character had just grown so big overnight, and then it was bullying me. It was really like, interrogating me, and this intrusive thoughts. And this is what a lot of people don't understand when they call it's such a selfish way to do, and it's such a selfish act. And it's just like, when you get this ill, it's so overpowering. And actually there's a scene in Star Wars, and in Return of the Jedi where Luke talks to Darth Vader, and Luke was, says to Darth Vader, Anakin's still in there, and I can't I'm paraphrasing, but Darth Vader kind of sort of says, the dark side is too powerful, and it is like the Sith inside of you is starting to completely take you over. And as much people saying it's selfish, it's like, no, it's like a black tar poison inside of you, inside of your brain, starting to overtake. And this is when I had the mix of the SSRIs going on, and then probably all the neurodivergent stuff, because now I've learned that SSRIs and ADHD and everything as well are massively conflicting. So they're probably playing this horrible game of like brutal football inside of me, kicking me around, and then like these beasts are just getting bigger and bigger. And that morning I got myself dressed, and it's so hard to think that I was going to drop my kids off to school, but all the while I was planning to just take my life, and it's just and I did drop them off, and that kiss on the forehead, I still remember it. I remember the smell, the sight, the sound. And anyway, I planned, and this is the problem with too many films and TV shows. I planned to get a hose, cut it, go to a forest with my guitar, put it in the exhaust, do it that. And that was plan 2. Plan B. And I got home, I got it all prepped. And then there was just this sudden force, this sudden shift inside of me. And I took myself to the sofa, and I just completely and utterly broke down into tears. And I'm sort of thinking now, was that again another mental hurdle that my brain was telling me to don't go, don't do this. And I tried phoning Samaritans but the phone was ringing for like 2 minutes, and I was just like, I could have done this by now. I could have gone. And so I was like, oh, that was shit. I tried something else. I did get a lovely email from Samaritans the next day saying, I'm so sorry, all sorts of stuff as well, and it's very abnormal for that to happen. So I'm not dissing the service or anything as well, but it's just something I can't use again because it didn't work for me. But then there's this amazing service called Shout, where you have a text service. And I've never been so vulnerable in my life. I had to text my wife, and I had to fight. It's almost like I had to fight my hand through this invisible darkness, this like sort of spider web, this like poisonous. It's like a superhero film, Venom. That's what comes to mind actually when it comes to mental health. It's like Venom was holding me back, and I had to push through Venom to get through and then get hold of the phone and then text my wife saying, you need to come home now. I don't feel safe. And I was, to have the resilience and the strength to do that. I still feel proud of doing that, because unless you've been through it and unless you know what this feels like, you don't know what that strength is. When you're literally on the floor, and I'm talking about, when you're depression, you've got nothing, you've got no strength left. And this is not physical strength, it's just mental strength. It's completely zapped you, and you're 0%, and you still need to find that extra, whatever percentage, to get to that phone. As soon as I text her, she said she was on her way, and then I text Shout, and then they went for a process of lots of questions, and then they wanted me to then talk about my plans. And that was really fucking hard. It was really hard, but I did it. And the greatest thing about that service is, had I just spoken to Samaritans on the phone, and then my wife got home and asked me about it, I don't think I would have been able to articulate it. But because I texted it and I said it in words, when she did get home and she, put her head on my shoulder, and I didn't have to say anything. I just passed her the phone, and she could see everything. It was completely transparent, and that's what was needed. And then we watched like an episode of Friends or whatever it is, because that goes back to our teens. And that night, I downloaded the second Lord of the Rings film. So I was a kid at Christmas again. And it was just like the extremes, ups and downs of this crisis week. And then for the next few days, I started drawing, and I was writing out about like the beast inside of me and the darkness and all these other things. And I've got a little book somewhere that I've kept. And I was fine for the next few days. But then plan 3 was building. And I think my wife and children went to church. But what had happened is at 6 a.m, I think my children went down to watch TV, and I got up, and I was not in a good way, and I kind of went down there, and they were not, I can't remember what it was, they weren't happy, but then I took myself back to bed at 6, and I didn't wake up until 9 or something like that. But in the space of 2 or 3 hours, my brain had come up with another plan. And then I waited until my wife and children went to church. And I emptied the medicine cupboard, put it up, put everything that I could get my hands on the side. Got the office ready, put the blinds, suicide note, picture. And then there was another interrupt in my brain. And it just said, sit down. Play your guitar for a bit. Just take a break from this for a little bit. Let's see how we do. So I sat in the kitchen, just playing my guitar like it was guitar therapy. And weirdly enough, an idea materialized. And that's what happens when I just pick up my guitar. And then it kicked in. Shit, what am I doing? What am I doing? And then I then phoned a friend, and I only spoke to him a few days before, and he came over. He walked through the door. He's not someone I see on a daily basis, and he still had his coat on, and I was frozen. And this is when you're in your most vulnerable state and everyone can see exactly what has been going on. He walked in, crouched down, looked at me and said, "How you doing?" And then I sort of gestured. I showed him everything up on the surface. I showed him, all the tablets and all the things that I had planned. And I'd never felt so vulnerable in my life. It's like when someone can see your darkest moment. And it was strange. And anyway, we had to go to A&E that night. And I was in A&E, and I overheard, one guy came in and he talked about, he was just about to hang himself, and I heard another thing, and I heard another thing, and I was just like, shit. Oh my goodness, where the fuck am I? What the fuck is happening? And did lots of tests and things as well. Felt like I was patronised by mental health services, by nurse and practitioners at the hospital. I know they ask you questions. I know they do this stuff as well, but it's almost like a patronising thing of like, you do know you have children, you do know what this would do, and it's just like, you clearly don't understand what the depth of it is, what it does to your insides. This was not me taking myself away from my children. This was not me taking myself away from my loved ones. This was the strangest survival mode I've ever been through in my life. Survival mode normally means that you're surviving something. But actually, I did. I survived that week. I had interrupts at certain points to stop me from it. And then we went back home to the island. It was literally like a week after, and I don't think I should have done that. It was horrible for all of us. And the responses I got, I should forget, but they damaged me even more from some of the conversations I had with, in some cases, absolutely no response. And then I was accused of jabbering. Whereas actually, I just needed to be heard and seen, and maybe a bit of empathy or maybe acknowledgement. And then you could tell I didn't have to say anything, but I was looked upon as weak, and I was looked upon as sensitive and not normal and other things as well. Again, people didn't have to say these things, but just a look, just a presence that you have. And then I was just like, in one part of my brain, I was like, how dare you? And then the other side of my brain, I was just like, it's fine. That's the way you are. And it's still, those things can still cut you up, but I'm not, what I'm trying not to do is obviously live in the present all the time. I'm trying to live in the present and the future and what I have now. But all these things can bring up really, really hard feelings. And then, it was my birthday, and I just remember I had friends up here who were so much more supportive than some of the other close people around me, bar a few. And they really helped me even if it's just something small, even just going for a walk, going out for a meal, or going for a coffee, and just listening and just allowing me to be myself and understanding that that's who I am. And then on Christmas Eve, then I had a psychiatric assessment for an hour and a half where they dissect you, and it was like, oh, fucking hell, this was horrible. But I was still very raw. Like I just lost an arm, or I just lost a limb, and I was just starting to try and condition to it. And then I had to go through this, and I thought I had bipolar because of the ups and downs and everything. But at the end of it, they were like, and this was like, you know, two people conferring to each other. At the end of it, they were like ADHD and autism, which, and then it was like Christmas Eve. So it was like, Happy Christmas. And then that kicked off like an identity crisis in some ways, because it was like, what? I've been living under this bloody rock and cloud for my whole life. And now I know, now I find out it's got a 4-year wait for the assessments, and I can't get to meds, and I can't get to this. And it's just like, what? And then I went through 6 months turmoil. And then I had a relapse in July 2022, sorry. Last year in this case, in 2023. And my wife and children went away for the weekend. And I almost planned to go with them, and I didn't. I stayed behind. And I planned to take myself to a train station and just jump. And I got to the train station, and then I sat down, and then a speeding train comes past, and I felt the momentum, and it almost jolted me to the point of, shit, no. And again, there was another interrupt. And I did have my wife and children in my brain, and I did have all these other things, but you could tell I was still not well. And I had my best friend who really helped me. He lives out, lives in America. So we were over just talking over WhatsApp, but he really, really helped me. But it's so strange thinking about this now when I'm on my own 2 feet and I'm thinking clearly, but all of that is still crystal clear. And then I've gone into therapy, and then I've gone into other things, secondary healthcare and all these other things, and learning about myself and accepting my neurodivergent brain and accepting things about me and the way I do things. And I think the key thing is that I've been masking for so many years, and to go through multiple sort of hurdles, and then COVID really did blow up everybody's mental cracks. But a really, really sad thing I saw, and it just popped up. I'm part of some Facebook groups. I saw a guy, there's someone put up a photo, and this was the last photo before he took his own life. And there's high percentages. I don't know the exact percentages, and I know there's high rates, especially with males and things, and it's set between a certain age and stuff. And I'm like, right, I'm right in the sort of crux of this age bracket. And it made me feel really like some people were saying, oh, such a selfish act and everything as well. And he obviously felt like he had nobody. He had no hurdles. He had no interrupts to get him out of that. He didn't deliberately take himself away from his loved ones. I know these people who have taken their life, they've not done it to take themselves away from their loved ones. Their brain, it's almost like it's been venomed. It's been poisoned to the point where it's tunnel visioned, and it's gone into like hunter mode, and everything else gets shut out. And there's probably a science, it's a chemical thing, and it just encloses. And I just saw that I just felt so sad. And I've gone through 4 different plans, and I'm still here. And one of my goals for 2023 was just not to have another crisis. I just don't want a hat trick of crises, even though I had 3 plans during the first one. But the key thing now is support networks and to talk about it. This is why I want to do this episode. Not to, oh, look, I'm promoting this and I'm talking about this. So, you know, whatever it is, I don't want, it's not that bullshit. This is just openly talking about something. I've gone through it. I got through it. I got to the other side. But it has left a scar. It's left a stain in my brain that I get flashbacks and I can see it crystal clear. And because I know what the bottom of the floor is now, one, I know, you know, if I'm having a bad day, it's not as bad as those days. But 2, I think it's like when you learn a lot about something, your pool gets deeper in regards to experience. So if you know what the bottom of your pit is, or you've hit rock bottom, there's 2 sides to the coin. It's a strength, but it's also a weakness, because if you get something, if I go into depression, I have all those memories from that time that can really pull me in to the bottom of that floor. But I think it's just the strength to talk to people, get access to everything I need. I've come off of all meds now. And the first crisis week I was weaning off of the old SSRI and moving into the other one, which is like a sleeping giant. But I just think talking about it. And men as well, you know, I mean, I've grown up with men from different generations and they don't talk about this shit. And it's almost like, no, we're men, we shouldn't talk about it. But then the suicide rate is up like massively. It's just like, this is just ridiculous. This is why are we doing this? And I remember being on a train actually in between the crises. I was going up to see some friends. And on the way back, I heard 2 guys talking to each other. And he said, oh yeah, I lost my brother-in-law last year at the age of 38 to suicide. And it was just like, he took himself into a forest and it was just so sad. It's just like, oh my goodness. I know how those people feel now. I know exactly where they are and what they went through. And then to not have those interrupts. And I think that's the key, is to try and find interrupts, trying to find things that you can hold on to, trying to find ways that trigger words or thoughts or feelings, or maybe like, I mean, this is a Neurodivergent Musician podcast. So if you're a musician, have your instrument. And if you feel like your instrument is a learning tool, convert it into a therapy tool for now. You know, instead of standard tuning, I go to open tunings, and it's a really great way of doing that. And I've talked a little bit about that. So that is my improvised thoughts in the amber section. I'm going to go into a recommendation now. So in the green section, I'm going to keep this short and sweet, but I think out of everything that worked was the Shout text service. It's not the best, because when I used it the second crisis, I felt like I got the same predicted sort of script again. And when you work in business and when you work in different areas, you kind of cotton on to certain things and you're like, oh, You're using the same terminology again. You're asking the same questions again. And that felt very formatted. And I was like, oh, it's not as personal as I thought. And you really do need personal touch in those points, which is probably what Samaritans works, but it didn't work at that point. But what I liked about Shout was the evidence. So those texts are really, really vital for your support network and the loved ones you've got around you, whether they're going to view it on your phone, or you can just copy and paste it to someone else and you can show them the conversations that way. What I would like to see with something like Shout is in ChatGPT now, you can build a thread, a chat, but they now have a facility, a feature where you can share the chat. So you don't have to go and scroll and then select all the whole conversation and copy and paste it over into a text, because that's just bloody long. And no one wants to be scrolling through stuff. Obviously, loved ones are really concerned, so they might do. But I just think when you can share a thread and just give them a link, they can go over, and it makes life so much easier. That's what I'm doing with ChatGPT at the moment. When I've come across lots of different things, I've just shared the link because, I also have this thing where I become obsessed and I can cling on to people who really care for me, but they end up getting millions and millions and millions of texts. And then I've overdone it and I've overcooked it, and then they get exhausted, which is why I disconnect from a lot of people. Because if they really take me in and rein me in and they want to be with me, I will become a leech. And that's just because of the way my brain works. And then I will just chat, whether it's text or verbally or whatever it is and stuff. And I will not stop. And then I feel like I've overcooked it in other many ways. But anyway, that's my improvised babble there. But yeah, I would check out the chat. I would check out the Shout service in the UK. There's obviously all sort of mental health charities and companies and organizations locally, NHS, so many, and Mind website. There's loads and loads. I mean, I might be talking just the UK here, but I imagine they're all across the world. But I wanted to share these thoughts because I think it's really, really important. And this is an episode that I wanted to do. It's the hardest episode to do because it's completely and utterly vulnerable, and you're talking about your darkest moments. But I hope this is the darkest episode. I do. I think it's vital. And just know, if you're going through struggles, you're not alone. And please do reach out. You can speak to me anytime. Go to johnhartmusic.com to the contact page. You can go to Messenger. You can go to Facebook, Instagram, John Hart Music, JONHART Music, and just get in touch. And I'm always there to chat, because the more we can chat about this, the easier life can be. We don't have to just live in this world where we just struggle. And yeah, those are my thoughts. So thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much for listening to this episode. And if you do like the podcast, please let me know. And if you'd like to suggest any, subjects going forward or any guests, please do get in touch with me as well. And yeah, thanks so much for listening. And I'll see you in the next episode. Cheers. Take care.